and welcome to SureenaSpeaks, and in today's video features Mr. Aamer Safdar. Now, Aamer is a GPhC council member, he's a fellow of the RPS, he's a clinical lecturer, and these are just to name a few of the roles that he's involved in. So I hope after watching my talk with him, you too feel inspired by the opportunities that are out there, and hopefully after hearing his career journey and his career path, it will inspire your career too. So I do hope that you like this video, and if you do, then please give it a thumbs up, share, like, subscribe. Do also visit my Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and just sit back, relax and listen up. Hello Aamer, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hello.
A personal note, I'm so excited to have you here because your career path and career journey truly inspires me, because you've been in so many different roles, you've had so many different opportunities that I'm sure your words of wisdom are really going to, actually I know your words of wisdom are really going to inspire so many people that are going to watch this. So before we go any further and talk about all the different roles you're involved in, please can you introduce yourself?
So my name's Aamer Safdar. I'm a pharmacist. I'm currently working at Barts Health NHS Trust, and I'm currently a member of the registrant member of GPhC Council. So I'm vice chair of a very unique multi-academy trust called Odyssey Trust for Education, which is the only trust in the country which has a high-performing grammar school partnered with a requiring improvement secondary modern school. And it's a real journey in terms of improving the quality of the education for our young people in King Henry School, which is a secondary modern which is struggling at the moment.
Wow, how did you get involved in something like that?
So probably about 2012, my wife has been a governor for a long time, and she encouraged me to, there was a vacancy at Townley Grammar School. So it's a local school. So I applied, went there, had an interview. It wasn't really an interview. They saw my credentials and thought, you know, we want you.
Yeah.
And then I became a governor. And then about 2 years ago, we set up this trust. And I was part of the project steering group in setting it up, and then became a trustee. And now, as of, I think it was last month, I'm now vice chair of the trust.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And it goes to show your credentials speak for themselves, really, which is why it's so exciting to have you here today. So if we rewind time, go all the way back, what moment was it for you where you thought, I want to do pharmacy, I want to be a pharmacist? What was that light bulb moment, as I call it?
I'll tell you what it was. I'd failed my A-levels, and I was resitting the year, and I was working in a local community pharmacy, and there was this locum pharmacist who was persuading me to do pharmacy, because originally I wanted to read maths at Birmingham University, and I'd actually applied for Birmingham University through UCAS, but he persuaded me. And in those days it was more of, you know, you can work in a community pharmacy, you can run a business, you can make some money. Yeah. That's where I was at it from. So I then spoke to a careers person and managed to get out of Birmingham University to do maths, and ended up because it was a whole saga in terms of how I ended up at what is now called the UCR School of Pharmacy, but at the time it was the London School of Pharmacy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So I always find it quite interesting where it's that one thing that ends up changing everything, almost like a domino effect. Like for me, I never got the grades that I was meant to get at A-level to go to King's, so I ended up going to Reading. And for me, at the time, I was, you know, I wanted my first choice, but actually it turned out to be the best thing in the world. So it's just funny how sometimes, as cliche as it can sound, sometimes things do happen for a reason, and that domino effect that it then creates as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. And I guess for many people, whether this is someone who has been a pharmacist for years and years and years, probably in the same role for years and years and years, or even someone who's a newly qualified pharmacist, it can be quite hard to know what you want to go into and what you want to do, and you can feel slightly stuck in a rut sometimes. So with your career path and your journey, do you feel that sometimes opportunities presented themselves because of roles that you were in before? So for example, when you were lecturing at King's, did that then open opportunities for UCL, or being a fellow at RPS, did that then open opportunities at GPhC, for example?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if I go through my career, I mean, I applied for, I mean, I didn't really apply for my community pharmacy because that was given that I was going to do my pre-reg there. But I applied for hospitals, and I actually got into Guy's and St Thomas's. And at the time, I didn't know so much about Guy's and St Thomas's, and did my pre-reg then. At the end of my pre-reg, my intention was to go into community pharmacy and, be a locum, eventually own a pharmacy and that side of things. But I ended up staying in hospital. Simply because I applied for a residence job and didn't get it the first time. And then they persuaded me to apply again. So I applied again, then I got it. And, you're right around when opportunities present themselves, you have to go for it. I've never said no to any opportunity. So even if it means doing lots of hard work, you never, you don't know when you're going to get that chance again. So it's really important to grab things as they come.
No, I think that's really sound advice as well, is that power of being able to take those opportunities with both hands and take them forward. So for anyone who wants to, let's start off with being a lecturer, for example, for anyone who wants to go into that kind of a role, what advice would you have for them? What should they be searching for on search engines, for example?
So the thing is, it's not necessarily about the searching thing. It's going to a local university that you did your degree in, depending on where you live, because it might be that you were living up north and you studied down south. But if you can get in touch with the university that's local to you, and if you're a pharmacist or even not a pharmacist, as a student as well, it's what students really want is a lived experience of somebody who's working in a pharmacy. And you could start with going to your school, your local school. They're crying out for people to come and do careers talks, and go and do a careers talk, and then get that student to come in, a student to come into your workplace and shadow you, type of thing. When you do that, you're not really lecturing in the sense of at the university, but what you're doing is you're getting used to you're feeding forward what you learned as an undergraduate yourself.
Yeah.
And as you do that more, what will happen is that hopefully, as you get more experience, as you become more braver going to the university, they'll call on you even more to come and facilitate some workshops or come and do talk at the university. And that's your stepping stone into the university. And then as time goes on, the way that pharmacy is changing in terms of its undergraduate degree, what you find is we need more and more people who are willing to go and speak to students about pharmacy while they're studying their undergraduate, because the whole lecturing thing is, I mean, I taught law and ethics, but I then learned law and ethics before as I was teaching it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a topic. If I was at university, when I was at university, I would never ever have thought that somebody like me would be standing in front of 100 students at King's teaching law and ethics of all subjects.
Yeah.
But even when I did that, I made sure that I could tell the students everyday stories of how you apply the law and the ethics side of things. The other thing that you could do as a pharmacist is with dispensing classes. It's supervising dispensing classes, because while you're supervising the students, you're also sort of going to be telling stories around what it's like to work in your pharmacy, what experiences you've had, why do you need to make correct labels, and what can go wrong if your labels are wrong. And by doing that, you're being noticed within the academic circles. Yeah. And then you can end up, being a teacher practitioner type of role.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you with that whole being able to share experiences and stories and relate to people, because when you're able to put what you're learning into context, into real life situations, it's then, I think, a much easier way to then absorb that information. Specifically, because especially with something like law and ethics, which can be quite a chunky amount of information, especially the law side of it, to take in. But if you contextualize it, actually, it doesn't seem such a big topic anymore, and it seems chunked down. And I guess students will then find that in those exams or in similar situations, they can think back to those previous stories that you've told them, for example, and it's learning in that way. It's learning in a completely different way.
Yeah, I mean, people will always remember a good story. That's the key thing. So, you know, I still get people coming to me who I taught at King's, and they were one of 100 people. Oh, I liked your lectures. You told stories. I did tell stories, but it was around it was linking in with
Yeah.
the topic that I was talking about.
And that's really nice that that's what you're remembered for as well. Because I'm sure for you, you've taught hundreds and hundreds of students, but to the students, you're you. So that must be a really special feeling as well when you get feedback like that.
I mean, it's really weird because a few weeks back, I got a Twitter message from somebody who, interestingly, I'd rejected about 15 years ago, and he followed me, and then I followed him back, and he wrote a message to me saying, "You're really helpful," and you know, I was happy at the end because I gave him good advice, but I didn't realize I was giving somebody good advice. I was doing what I always do.
Yeah.
And I rejected him. It's not as if I gave him a job, but he's still thanking me. It's really
No, but
weird.
in that rejection, you still probably helped him get onto the path that he was meant to go on in many ways.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he said.
Yeah. And you know what, with speaking about, interviews in general, I think sometimes when you don't get that interview, actually getting that constructive criticism and feedback is actually more helpful than someone just saying, oh yeah, we just decided not to go for you. You want that kind of feedback. And I guess when you're on the other side of it, when you're interviewing candidates for any of the roles that you've been in, what kind of qualities or experiences are you looking for? So let's take sort of the lecturing role, for example, or even like as a GPhC council member, what kind of qualities is it that you're looking for within that candidate?
So it's difficult to answer because you look for specific things. But when you are interviewing, you're looking to make sure that that person's got background knowledge of the subject at hand, of whatever type of role they're going to go into. They've done some research.
Yeah.
They've done some research into the organisation that they're applying for. But also they are relatively confident in terms of, when they're doing their interviews. And when a question comes which is going to be a surprise for them, they have to think it through. It's that logical thought process that helps. So when we ask a difficult question, because you're always going to get difficult questions in an interview, what we're looking for is, how is that answer being structured? Or is there a structure within that answer? Or is somebody you can make it up as you go along, because sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah.
But it's that thought process that's really important for me. And it's also the personality, in terms of, if it's for somebody that I'm recruiting to work in my team, it's got to be somebody that would fit in to my way of working, would fit into my team, and wouldn't ruffle feathers for the sake of ruffling feathers.
No, I completely agree with all of that. I was just thinking of a story that someone once told me, that they got asked in an interview really randomly, what type of biscuit would you be? And it was that thing of it, you could say anything, it didn't matter, but it's just, what is the thought process behind that? What is the rationale and the reasoning behind that? So that one's always stuck with me. For some, I didn't get asked that, but someone else I know got asked it.
Well, I got asked, what animal, if you was an animal, what animal would you be?
There we go.
And I said to the interviewer, I don't think you're qualified to interpret my answer, but I'll call myself a chameleon.
Oh, that's
I was being facetious.
That is a good one though. I do like that. I might take that one if I ever get asked now.
Changes colour the way the wind's blowing.
No, exactly. I don't know what I would have said. I would have come up with something, I'm sure, pretty random next to that. So let's talk about GPhC. So GPhC council member, what does that actually mean? So what does that role entail? Do you have a typical day-to-day, or is every day different? Can you tell us more about that?
So GPhC council is really, really interesting. I joined GPhC council last year, and that was at the point when the initial education and training standards were being consulted on, or had been consulted on, because when they came out, I was with the RPS, on the RPS board, and when the consultation finished, I had joined the GPhC. And what I've realized is that they brought me in for my expertise and experience in education and training. And that's really helped with what's going on at the moment with respect to changing the degree and having foundation training and those big changes. The other thing I learned with the GPhC was that it was very different to the RPS in terms of the RPS board and how GPhC Council runs, because GPhC Council has half of their members are non-pharmacists and they come from different backgrounds, and they're really high caliber people. And you can learn a lot from, or I have learned a lot from, how they articulate questions, how they answer questions, and how they challenge the executive, which is really, really useful. Why are they thinking the way that they're thinking?
Yeah.
And me as a pharmacist and my pharmacist and pharmacy technician colleagues, we always come at it from the perspective of the profession in terms of what's going on the ground and what our thoughts are for pharmacy. So you have that tension between the non-pharmacists who are thinking as a patient or member of the public, and there's us who are grounded in pharmacy. And that's a nice tension to have, because GPhC ultimately is there for protecting the patients and the public, rather than what many people think is protecting pharmacy. It's not there to protect pharmacy. Yeah. It's all about patients and the public.
Yeah. And like you said, it's good that there is that balance, that you're getting the two different perspectives, because you might be somewhat blindsided because you're used to one way of thinking or used to one form of perspective or one trail of thought, but actually someone else giving light to a different way of thinking, it gives a more rounded answer to everything, I guess, then.
Yeah, and the other thing is that everybody on council has got their own skill set, so they're all different. So it's diverse. And what makes a good board or council is where you have that diversity of thinking. And we have, well, prior to COVID, we used to have workshops and council meetings, and it was in the workshops where you discussed your thoughts and ideas in an open space where you could just, you could say whatever you wanted to say. Yeah. Council meetings are a bit more formal because they're public, and it's approving policies and standards and things like that. What's happened now since COVID is everything's done like this, remote. Yeah. So we have remote workshops, we have remote meetings and remote council meetings. So what you don't get is the coffee time chats, getting to know people, and the lunchtime conversations with people to, just to get to know them really. But it's a big task at the moment with all the pressure that GPhC is under with respect to the pre-reg exam. Yeah, it's a tough gig at the moment.
Yeah, and like you said, with the foundation training program as well, and all the changes within IET as well, there's a lot happening.
It's the biggest change we've had since 1997, when the degree went from 3 years to 4 years. In my opinion, it's that big, and I'm privileged to be on GPhC Council while all this is happening.
No, I mean, thank you for all the work that you're doing as well, because I know you do fly, wave the flag high for pre-reg students as well.
I'll try that.
Yeah, no, and I know you're big supportive of pre-reg students too. So I guess my final question to you then is, what advice do you have to any pre-reg, pro-reg, newly qualified, or even a pharmacist who has been in a role for years and years and years and doesn't really know what they want to do? What general career advice do you have for them?
So I would say follow your interests, be brave, and then take calculated risks if you want to change. But then again, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I stayed at Guy's and Thomas's for 20 or 25 years. Within that, I did lots of different things. Yeah. And then I moved to Bart. So what I do say to people actually, is if you have a particular interest or passion, then go for it. But you've got to balance that with your own responsibilities. So if you have caring responsibilities, or that you're going to have relationships and you need the money, to make sure you have a bit of stability in your income so that you can do these things. So for some people, they want to stay in community pharmacy and see patients. That's absolutely fine, great. Some people want to stay in hospital pharmacy, great. But then there are people who want to leave pharmacy and go into medicine, for example, or go into banking or finance. And that's great too, because if that's what you want to do. But pharmacy, I think, is at this place where it's changing so rapidly, and we are now in this NHS really, really needing more and more pharmacists. And a lot of the pharmacist roles are becoming more diverse, in the sense that we're beginning to see people who are working in a primary care network, in a GP practice, also working community pharmacy. And the ideal for me would be somebody who works in a hospital and community and GP all in the same week in a local area. So if a patient comes into a community pharmacy, they see you, they go to a GP practice, they see you, they're admitted to the hospital, they see you. And it's that side of things to me, which I think students should be thinking about the future rather than the here and now, because I think the here and now is tricky because of COVID, and it will take a bit of time for things to settle down post-COVID in 2021. But the need for pharmacists is, and the way that the degree is changing, so we have prescribing at the end of the degree, that's the proposal, then that gives you so much scope to do the things that you want to do within pharmacy. But sometimes you need to get through the basic stuff first. So your foundation years, get through those first. And then, I mean, when I started as a pharmacist, I never thought I'd ever be an education and training pharmacist. I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I followed my interests. And once I found my niche, and there was no reason for me to change. I thought, I love this. I love looking after pre-regs. I love education and training. So there's no reason for me to change. But in my early years, I chopped and changed quite a lot in terms of finding what I wanted to do for long term.
Yeah, and I think you said it so eloquently there, but that's really why I'm doing this feature, is to show that there is so much diversity within pharmacy. There are so many different roles out there and opportunities out there. Like you said, it's about exploring what your interest is, taking those calculated risks and going for them, because if you don't try, I guess you'll never know.
Yeah.
But
if it doesn't work out, it's a good experience. At least you know that.
Exactly. And sometimes I think there's almost a good thing in knowing what you don't want to do, because then it kind of leads you onto a path of then what you do want to do, if that makes sense. Because if you have too many opportunities in front of you, it can then get quite overwhelming. So it's about finding that balance, I guess, more than anything.
I was just going to say that I promote the mentoring, because I think with careers advice, I think it's really important that you have a mentor. You have somebody who's had that lived experience who can guide you in terms of your career choices. A mentor doesn't need to be anybody who's senior necessarily. It could just be, you know, a friend of yours, as it were, because you're using each other as a sounding board. But you need to trust that person to say, look, I am really interested in this, but I'm not brave enough to make that jump. That type of conversation.
And I guess you sometimes need that mentor to be someone who isn't within your circle either. So someone who can kind of give you that impartial advice. I'm going to say thank you so much for your time today, for your nuggets of knowledge, the insights and advice that you've given to me, to my viewers. It's been really, really appreciated, and really, really grateful for your time. So thank you so, so, so much.
No worries, my pleasure.
All right, then take care.
Bye.